Welcome back to the Knife Studio. In this video, we're going to be fitting the guard, the front spacer, and the wooden part of the handle to the blade. If you want to see how we got to this stage so far, check out part 1. So since this knife is for our special online course that we're working on, I wanted to see if I could use some simpler, more budget-friendly tools and get the same results with a perfect guard fit. I start by cutting the right length of 4/16 stainless that we're going to need for the guard. The block of wood I'm super gluing to the guard is so I can hold it better while it's on the grinder and the disc sander. It's really easy to get rid of the piece of wood after I'm done with it. I just heat up the metal and the super glue lets go of it. Need to get a good layout for where to make the Tang slot in the guard. I'm using my sketch as a reference for where the ricasso goes and where the top and bottom quillions of the guard need to be. I use the calipers to scratch some center lines in the guard so I can figure out where the middle needs to be for our Tang slot. I pick out a drill bit that's just a little bit smaller than the thickness of the Tang near the ricasso, and then I'm just kind of roughing in where each hole needs to be for the Tang slot on the guard. I'm just kind of eyeballing the drill bit spacing, and I'm using a Sharpie to kind of keep track of that so I know where each hole needs to go. If you get the holes too close to each other, the drill bit will wander into your previous hole, and if they're too far apart, you'll have a lot more filing to do. I like to start out by having nice sharp drill bits, and the disc sander is really good for sharpening bits. I like to pilot each hole with a smaller drill bit and then go through it with the larger drill bit after I have a nice hole started. I normally use the milling machine to cut my slots into the guard, but since I'm trying to do way more of a budget-friendly version right now, I'm just using the drill press and I'll connect those holes with a file to make my slot. It's time to start connecting all these holes with a round file so we can get a flat file in there and start making it more of a rectangular slot. I like to take my time with files and slowly expand the slot on the guard to make sure I don't overdo it anywhere, and then I keep fitting with the blade over and over again until that blade fits about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from the ricasso. Once I got the guard fitting about 1/8 of an inch away from the ricasso, I can move on to hammering the guard on further, and that'll really get a nice fit. And I also do some filing as we go. I like to wrap lots of layers of tape around the blade so I can clamp it super tight in the vise without scuffing up the blade. Here's the hardened steel flat plate and the special punch I made to hammer my guards on. I like to use a fair amount of force with the hammer, but once everything stops moving, I have to hammer the guard off and selectively go in with your file on those places and gently remove just a little bit more material. There's some metal that got squished up from hammering the guard onto the Tang, and it's easily flattened back out on the disc sander. We're getting closer and closer. I keep removing the guard, filing away little bits where you can see the Tang was rubbing really hard on it, and then hammering it back on. I put a little bit of a bevel right on the top and bottom of the slot to help the guard fit further and further. Now the guard's fitting good enough to where I can go around the ricasso and lightly scribe a line onto the guard. I'll later use this line as a reference for where I need to remove material because I want the ricasso to fit into the guard. So I'm going to remove material everywhere that ricasso is going to touch the guard with a little dental burr. I normally use an actual dentist tool for removing this metal and a microscope that costs over $3,000. Since I'm doing this knife though for the special online course, I wanted to make it more accessible to a wider range of people that may not have access to some of those expensive tools. So here I'm using a $100 rotary handpiece and a cheap Optivisor instead of the microscope. The trick here is to get right up close to that line we scribed around the ricasso without going over the line. If you go over the line with that burr, it's going to be very noticeable on the guard fit. I have to keep going back in with files and lightly remove some more material here and there if the guard is going on too hard. I like to use a Sharpie at this point to kind of help me see where the guard's hitting and be able to adjust and file away or use the burr to keep removing some material and get that guard to fit over the ricasso 5 to 20 thousandths of an inch or so. Rinse and repeat as many times as it takes to get that perfect fit on the guard. I also want to make sure once that guard's fit all the way to where it needs to go, that it sits nice and square onto the blade. If your guard doesn't fit nice and square onto the blade, it'll probably cause problems as you try to fit the rest of your handle. And that's how you get the perfect fit on a guard without breaking the bank. Total cost and equipment used to fit this guard, $300, compared to my normal setup, which is over $6,000. And the guard fit is just as good as what I normally get. Yes, it took a little bit of extra time, a little extra effort, but no different in the quality of the fit. The next part in the order of operations for my handle assembly is the front spacer. I got a big chunk of 4/16 that we're gonna go ahead and cut down and grind to thickness. I do some layout on the front spacer so we can know where we need to make the slot for the Tang. And again, I'm using the drill bit to kind of lay out where I need each hole to go. I don't want to get them too close so they run into each other, and we want to get them nice and close so we have less filing to do. It's a fine balance. I like to have nice strong center punch marks. Can really help the drill bit get started in the right place. Pilot the holes with an 1/8 inch drill bit, and then I'm going through it with our larger drill bit after that. This spacer's quite a bit thicker than it needs to be, so I need to grind it down to thickness and then get it flat on the disc sander. Make sure you don't breathe those fumes from the burning superglue. It's probably not good for your health. Just like a drawing from my childhood, let's connect the dots. Coffee break. Montana Ridge Arabic coffee, my favorite. Comment below with what your favorite coffee is. Not a sponsor. I slowly work the front spacer with files until it fits right up close to where it needs to go. And then I like to hammer it on the last little bit just to get a really snug fit. We want to be able to take the front spacer on and off without using a hammer, but we also don't want it to have a lot of play in it. I like to mark the top front side of my pieces, so I put them back onto the knife the same way every time. I probably should have used my little super glue wood handle trick right here, because this part almost flew out of my hands. And there we are. That's the front spacer fit up, right where it needs to go. We can move on to fitting the beautiful block of wood for this handle next. To start out with, I go ahead and make some reference lines on the sketch so I can line the handle of the sketch up. That allows me to mark a line on the front of the wood that has just the right angle for where the wood meets the front spacer. Once I get the angle ground on the front of the wood, I can then butt it up against the front spacer and kind of hold it over the sketch and double check to make sure that we're going to be able to get the right handle shape out of the wood. It's a good idea to make sure the angle on the front of the wood is right where you want it. I put the block of wood back on the sketch and draw a line for the angle on the back of the handle. I leave a little extra material just so I'll have some wiggle room later for the final fit up. Just about 1/8 of an inch should be plenty. It's time to start doing layout for the Tang slot on the block of wood. I can't see the lines on the side of the block very well due to the shiny finish, so I rough it up a bit on the grinder. Now I can clearly see my lines. Transfer those lines for the Tang onto the end of the handle so I know right where I need to drill. And then I mark out the center of the block so we can make sure the groove comes out right in the center of the handle. Since this is a through Tang design, my drill bit only needs to go through the block about halfway. Then I can flip the block over and drill the other half from the other direction. Make sure to spend time getting the drill bit to be just the right angle to only drill out the area where you want your Tang slot to be. You don't want that drill bit going anywhere else because you might end up with a hole on the side of your finished handle. It's a good sign once we connect our holes and see daylight through there because that means our drill at least went somewhat straight. I carefully use some side pressure on the drill bit to then connect the holes. There's only a little bit of material to remove because I got the holes really close to each other. It still takes a couple minutes and you have to be careful not to break your drill bit off since you're kind of doing something it's not designed to do. I've got all that webbing removed using the side of the drill bit, so I now have a solid slot going all the way through the handle. I have a couple homemade brooches that I use. I have one made out of a file, and the other one's just a piece of 5160 in different widths, and I use those to scrape away material inside of the slot for the Tang, and it helps me fit the Tang in there, because right now everything's really rounded, but the Tang is more of like a rectangular shape. And the brooches help me scrape that out and selectively remove some material to get that nice arching curve inside of there that the drill bit couldn't get because the drill bit's just going to go straight. It takes quite a bit of fitting and a lot of selective scraping to get the block of wood to fit just right. I also have to take it back to the drill press a couple times and use a little bit larger drill bit diameter. It's getting there. We're about 3/4 of an inch away from fitting to the front spacer. Here I'm using a file with the end ground at a nice solid 90-degree angle. I use a Sharpie to cover the Tang with some ink. And that way when I put my handle material onto the Tang, I can see where it's scraping on the inside of the wood, and then I can go in and better remove material with the brooches in the right spot. I'll be bedding this handle in epoxy later, so I want a good fit right now, but it doesn't need to be a perfect glove fit because that'll come later when we do the bedding. There we are. Nice snug fit all the way up against the front spacer. The last thing I'm going to work on here is getting a nice tight fit between the wood block and the front spacer. I throw it on the disc sander and get a really nice flat surface, and then keep holding it up to the light and make sure no light shines through any of the corners between the wood and the metal. And that is how I fit my guard, my front spacer, and my wood block for the handle. In the next video, I'm going to be working on the pommel, and we're going to fire up the lathe to make the pommel nut. So stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. We're all about making functional art, mostly in the form of custom knives. Hit that thumbs up button, it really helps us out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.